Bhagat Singh is considered to be one of the most influential revolutionaries of Indian nationalist movement. He became involved with numerous revolutionary organizations and played an important role in the Indian national movement. He died a martyr at the age of just 23 years. Following his execution on March 23, 1931, the supporters and followers of Bhagat Singh regarded him as a Shaheed martyr. Childhood and early life. Bhagat Singh was born on September 28, 1907, at Bunga in Lyalpur district, now Pakistan, to Kishan Singh and Vidyavati. At the time of his birth, his father Kishan Singh, uncles Ajit and Swaran Singh were in jail for demonstrations against the colonization bill implemented in 1906. His uncle, Sardar Ajit Singh, was a proponent of the movement and established the Indian Patriots Association. He was well supported by his friend Syed Haidar Raza in organizing the peasants against the Chenab Canal Colony Bill. Ajit Singh had 22 cases against him and was forced to flee to Iran. His family was the supporter of the Ghadar Party, and the politically aware environment at home helped incite a sense of patriotism in the heart of young Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh studied till the 5th class in his village school, after which his father Kishan Singh got him enrolled at the Dayanand Anglo-Vedic High School in Lahore. At a very young age, Bhagat Singh started following non-cooperation movement, initiated by Mahatma Gandhi. Bhagat Singh had openly defied the British and had followed Gandhi's wishes by burning the government-sponsored books. He even left the school to enroll at the National College in Lahore. Two incidents during his teen days shaped his strong patriotic outlook: the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919 and killing of unarmed Akali protesters at the Nankana Sahib in 1921. His family believed in the Gandhian ideology of non-violent approach to attain Swaraj, and for a while Bhagat Singh also supported the Indian National Congress and the causes behind the non-cooperation movement. Following the Chauri Chowra incident, Gandhi called for the withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement. Unhappy with the decision, Bhagat Singh isolated himself from Gandhi's non-violent action and joined the young revolutionary movement. Thus began his journey as the most prominent advocate of violent insurgency against the British Raj. He was pursuing B.A. examination when his parents planned to have him married. He vehemently rejected the suggestion and said that, if his marriage was to take place in slave India, my bride shall be only death. In March 1925, inspired by European nationalist movements, the Naujawan Bharat Sabha was formed with Bhagat Singh as its secretary. Bhagat Singh also joined the Hindustan Republican Association (HRA), a radical group, which he later rechristened as the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association (HSRA), along with fellow revolutionaries Chandrasekhar Azad and Sukhdev. He returned to his home in Lahore after assurances from his parents that he would not be compelled to get married. He established contact with the members of the Kirti Kisan Party and started contributing regularly to its magazine, the Kirti. As a student, Bhagat Singh was an avid reader, and he would read up about European nationalist movements. Inspired by the writings of Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, his political ideologies took shape and he became more inclined towards a socialist approach. He also wrote in newspapers like Veer Arjun under several pseudonyms. National movement and revolutionary activities. Initially, Bhagat Singh's activities were limited to writing corrosive articles against the British government, printing and distributing pamphlets outlining the principles of a violent rebellion aimed at overthrowing the government. Given his influence on the youth and his association with the Akali movement, he became a person of interest to the government. The police arrested him in a bomb blast case in Lahore in 1926. He was released after 5 months on a surety of 60,000 rupees. On October 30, 1928, Lala Lajpat Rai led an all-party procession and marched towards the Lahore railway station to protest the arrival of the Simon Commission. The police resorted to brutal lathi charge to thwart the progress of the protesters. The confrontation seriously injured Lala Lajpat Rai and he died on November 17, 1928. In order to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai, Bhagat Singh and his associates called on Superintendent of Police James A. Scott, supposedly ordered the lathicharge. Revolutionaries, J.P. Saunders, an assistant superintendent of police, instead of mistaking him as Scott, kills him. Bhagat Singh quickly moved to Lahore to avoid his arrest. To avoid recognition, he shaved his beard and cut his hair, which is a violation of the sacred principles of Sikhism. In response to the creation of the Defence of India Act, the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association planned to detonate a bomb inside the assembly complex, where the ordinance was being passed. On April 8, 1929, Bhagat Singh and Batukshwar Dutt threw a bomb on the corridors of the assembly, Inquilab Zindabad slogans, and threw pamphlets in the air outlining their missiles. The bomb was not meant to kill or injure anyone and was therefore thrown away from a crowded place, but still several council members were injured in the commotion. Both Bhagat Singh and Batukshwar Dutt were arrested after the blasts. 1929 Assembly Incident Trial. The dramatic display of protest faced widespread criticism from the political arena. Singh replied, "When force applied in an aggressive manner is violence and, therefore, morally unjustified, but when it is used for a legitimate cause, it has a moral justification." The trial proceedings began in May where Singh sought to defend himself, while Batukshwar Dutt was represented by Adhikar Ali. The court ruled in favor of the sentence of life imprisonment, citing malicious and unlawful intent of the blasts. Lahore conspiracy case and trial. Soon after the sentencing, the police raided the HSRA bomb factories in Lahore and arrested several prominent revolutionaries. 3 persons, Hans Raj Vora, Jai Gopal and Fanindra Nath Ghosh, became public witnesses for the government, which led to a total of 21 arrests, including that of Sukhdev, Jatindra Nath Das and Rajguru. Bhagat Singh was arrested again for the Lahore conspiracy case, the murder of Assistant Superintendent Saunders and bomb manufacturing. On July 10, 1929, the trial against the 28 accused began in a special sessions court headed by Justice Rai Saheb Pandit Sri Kishan. Meanwhile, Singh and his fellow prisoners declared an indefinite hunger strike to protest the prejudicial difference in the treatment of white versus native prisoners and demanded to be recognized as political prisoners. The hunger strike attracted tremendous press attention and garnered huge public support in favor of their demands. The death of Jatindranath Das after a 63-day-long fast intensified negative public opinion towards the authorities. Bhagat Singh finally broke his 116-day fast on October 5, 1929, at the request of his father and the Congress leadership. Due to the slow pace of legal proceedings, on May 1, 1930, on the instructions of the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, Justice J. Coldstream, Justice Aga Haider and Justice G.C., a special tribunal was set up consisting of Hilton. The tribunal was empowered to proceed without the presence of the accused, and there was a one-sided trial that hardly followed the guidelines of general legal rights. The tribunal delivered its 300-page judgment on October 7, 1930. It declared that irrefutable evidence had been produced confirming the involvement of Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru in the Saunders murder. Singh confessed to the murder and gave statements against British rule during the trial. He was sentenced to death till death. Bhagat Singh's death certificate. Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev were sentenced to death in the Lahore conspiracy case and ordered to be hanged on March 24, 1931. The program was extended for 11 hours and the three were hanged on March 23, 1931 at 7:30 p.m. in Lahore jail. Though it is said that the trio happily marched towards the gallows chanting their favorite slogans like Inquilab Zindabad and Down with British Imperialism. It is pointed out that at that time no magistrate was prepared to supervise Singh's execution as required by law. Instead, the execution was overseen by an honorary judge, who also signed 3 death warrants as their original warrants expired. Prison officials then broke a hole in the back wall of the prison, removed the bodies, and secretly cremated the 3 men under cover of darkness outside Ganda Singh Wala village, and then buried the ashes about 10 kilometers (6.2) away. Thrown into the Sutlej River. Miles from Firozpur. Thoughts and opinions of Bhagat Singh. Patriotism had sown its seed in Bhagat Singh's conscience from a very young age. He grew up to appreciate nationalism and longed for a British-free independent India. Extensive study of European literature led him to build a socialist vision, strongly wishing for a democratic future for his beloved country. Although born a Sikh, Bhagat Singh turned to atheism after witnessing several Hindu-Muslim riots and other religious outbursts. Singh believed that a precious thing like freedom could be achieved only by completely cleansing the exploitative nature of imperialism. He said that similar to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, such a change could only be brought forward through an armed revolution. He introduced the slogan, Inquilab Zindabad, which turned into the war slogan of the Indian independence movement. Popularity and legacy. Bhagat Singh. His intense patriotism as well as cultured idealism made him a perfect icon for the youth of his generation. He became the voice of his generation through written and vocal warnings from the government of the British Empire. His vigorous departure from the Gandhian non-violent path toward Swaraj has often been criticized by many, yet he inspired hundreds of teenagers and youth to join the freedom struggle wholeheartedly through his fearless embrace of the martyr. His superiority in the present day is evident from the fact that in a poll conducted by India Today in 2008, Bhagat Singh was voted as the greatest Indian ahead of Subhas Chandra Bose and Mahatma Gandhi. Bhagat Singh in popular culture. The inspiration that Bhagat Singh still ignites within the soul of Indians can be felt in the popularity of films and dramatic adaptations on his life. Several films such as Shaheed, 1965, and The Legend of Bhagat Singh, 2002, were made on the life of the 23-year-old revolutionary. Popular songs such as Moh Rang de Basanti Chola and Sarfaroshi Ki Tamanna, associated with Bhagat Singh, are relevant even today in inspiring patriotic feelings among Indians. Many books, articles, and letters have been written about his life, ideologies, and legacy. Bhagat Singh is also very popular on social media sites. On the video sharing website YouTube, you can find many videos on the life of the firebrand revolutionary, including Bhagat Singh's life story. Gandhi controversy. There have been suggestions that Gandhi had an opportunity to prevent Singh's execution, but he refrained from doing so. Another theory is that Gandhi actively conspired with the British to hang Singh. Conversely, Gandhi's supporters argue that he did not have enough influence with the British to stop the hanging, trying his best to save Singh's life. They also claimed that Singh's role in the independence movement posed no threat to Gandhi's role, so they would have no reason to put him dead. Gandhi always said that he was a big admirer of Singh's patriotism. He also said that he was opposed to Singh's execution, and for that matter, the death penalty in general, and declared that he had no power to stop it. Regarding Singh's execution, Gandhi said, "The government certainly had the right to hang these men." Gandhi also once remarked about the death penalty, "I would do my best to hang anyone." Can't quite agree. Only God can take life, because He alone gives. According to a report in the Indian magazine Frontline, he pleaded several times to commute the death sentences of Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev, including one on March 19, 1931. Personal travel was also included.